Hey everybody, Ben Feingold here with more recaps from round 7. The tournament's halfway over. We're halfway there. Whoa, living on a prayer. Don't sue me. Okay, so we got Fabiano Caruana versus Teimour Radjabov, the longest game of the round. Let's get into it. In this position, Radjabov already surprised the audience, which includes us and his opponent. A6, named after Karen's favorite player, Alberic O'Kelly, from Belgium, the O'Kelly Sicilian. In this position, A6, very rare at the top level. White usually plays C3 or C4. Fabi chose C4 after long thought. And Radjabov very quickly played E5, once again forcing Fabi into long thought. Fabi played knife F5, and not for the only time in the game. And in this position, Radjabov said, "Excuse me while I whip this out," and played D5 after lots of screaming. I was explaining that D5 could be played at some point, but I was surprised it was played so early. CD, bishop F5, EF5, knight D4. Now Fabi can defend either pawn or either pawn. And instead of playing knight C3, which we expected, he played bishop D3. And he said, if you want to take my pawn, be my guest. Be my guest. Okay, anyway, Radjabov did not have real gorilla chess. So he played queen takes D5. And Fabi's like, did you want to take another pawn? And Radjabov said, that's enough. Queen takes G2 loses immediately. Double question mark to bishop E4 attacking the queen. The queen has to move to safety. That looks pretty safe. Nothing else does. Queen A4 check, and the king is no good. If B5, we have knight takes B5. And the rook is hanging on A8, discovered, double, triple check, etc. And black's development is not good. Okay, so instead of queen takes G2 losing, black decided on queen D7, not losing, castles. And here, the engine wanted to castle queenside and still said white has a nice advantage. White has the two bishops, and black doesn't really have the what else. But he just developed his kingside calmly. Bishop E7. And now that he can castle kingside, he's moved his knight and his bishop, he tricked us. Also, he should castle kingside. Then after rook takes E5, he's down a pawn, but it's a doubled pawn, so not that great. But instead he castled queenside, very suspicious. Rook takes E5, white's up a pawn, white has the safer king, white has the two bishops, but black plays knight C6, always retreat, threatening everything. Rook E3 is very passive, but it's still okay. But instead he played bishop takes F6 with the following variation in mind. Knight takes E5, bishop takes E5, queen takes D3, white's always sacrificing the exchange. And now white has the amazing queen C1, and black's king is under tremendous pressure. And the engine says white's winning. No defense for that black king against white's onslaught. White's not really down much material. White has a knight and a pawn for a rook, and black's king is obviously ridiculous, wishing he would have castled kingside. So instead of losing, he played bishop takes F6, and we have this position where white is just a pawn up. It is a doubled pawn, and I would say his king is safer, so white's just much better here. So the opening gained a lot of time for Radjabov because Caruana wasn't expecting it. But the line that he played just gave him a worse position. Bishop C4. Nothing much happened the next few moves. They were moving around. And in this position, black missed his chance to play knight A5 because you want to take this bishop. And he played a move which looks better, but it's actually worse. He played knight D4, thinking, I'll attack the bishop that way, and this way my knight's on D4. That's a good square. Unfortunately, we have queen C4 now. If we go back to knight A5, you don't have queen C4, trust me. Queen C4 not possible. Now queen C4 gives white this really nice endgame. White has an extra pawn, and the F7 pawn is quite weak. Rook C8, bishop D3. Fabi decided to solidify his bishop on E4, never play F3. The bishop just stays there. White's up a doubled pawn. White has a great bishop on E4, and white can start advancing his kingside pawns and try to get an advantage that way. Rook E7, Rook D1, white has a big advantage. And in this position, after Rook D2, white wanted to play Knight D5. The engine not a fan of putting the rooks on these squares, so we have to take the knight. And after knight e5, rook c1, black blundered the game away. This position is much better for white, but black has some drawing chances by playing knight g4 check. If you take it, the engine says white's not even better here. Pawn structure's terrible. Then the knight goes back to f6, and obviously white has isolated pawns, doubled pawns. Black's very solid. Good drawing chances. Instead, he blundered, making the losing move f6. Never play f6. After realizing what he had done, Radjabov resigned and the game ended immediately. Except for one thing. The problem with f6 is it weakens the kingside white squares, and the dogs started barking now because they thought they were getting some Purina food, but they weren't. They misunderstood the checkered, chessboard there. And so now white has a very simple plan. Put the king on h5, always put it in h, play f4 attacking the knight, put the king on g6, and take all of these pawns. And you might think, that's far-fetched, that can't happen. Oh, it can't it? So f6 is a blunder because it gives away the g6 square, puts all the pawns on the same color, weakening the infiltration squares for white. King g3, rook d4, king h4. He plays rook d4 first to defend his bishop, so after f4, you can't take his bishop. King h5, he's like, you want to take my pawn? That's fine, I'll take all of your pawns. f4, rook d7, king g6, and you lose all your pawns. Radjabov tried to get counterplay with b5. He wins the c-pawn. Now in this position, the engine was thinking bishop f3, knight takes c3, a3, keeping the a-pawn, and we'll play king g6, rook d7 later. Fabi didn't want to do that. Fabi wanted to play quickly. King g6, give away the a-pawn, rook d7. Fabi literally didn't care about the two passed pawns. He wanted to take these pawns on g7 and f6. Again, the dogs thought this was the Purina logo, so they were barking.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt real quick. Thank you so much for that raid, Chess24.
Yay, Chess24. Rating during our recap.
Thank you so much. Okay, continue.
Okay, let's go back. Knight c3. Man, my mouse got slower. I wonder if I pushed one of these buttons. That's better. Now it's too fast. King takes g7. And now everybody has a passed pawn. Hooray. And this was move 40 for black. Everybody's queening their pawns on opposite sides. King takes f6. b3. Fabi played rook d2, so the pawn can't queen. a5. I got two pawns, one for each of you. King e6. He's like, that pawn's going to queen, and then I win. And Radjabov didn't like that. He didn't want that pawn to queen, because then after queen a8 check, it's going to be mate pretty soon. And white's queening first. We don't have time to push this pawn to fruition, because we queen first, check, and we could even take the queen if we didn't have mate. So he took the rook, king a6. He still wants to queen his queenside pawns. White's first, f6, b2, f7. And they both queen. Black queen's first. It looks like white's king is in trouble, but actually the rook and knight are corralled pretty nicely by the bishop and the pawn. There's no checks with these pieces. And white's threatening queen a8 check, winning immediately with mate or winning the queen. And white's still a pawn up. Queen g6 check is forced. Fabi thought a long time here, and the engine said the two legal moves both are +9. 9. He ended up playing queen f6. He figured with the queens off, the ending's easier to calculate. Queen e8 check. Rook e7 actually fails. He didn't play rook e7. Rook c6 check. And this is a very nice draw, pointed out by the engine. Knight check, knight takes. We both queen. And more than one thing draws, but the most obvious way to draw is to check on e5 and take the h-pawn. And then we have queen and pawn against queen and pawn. So rook e7 actually doesn't win. So he played king d6, which does win. Now in this position, he played rook c4. An interesting move was queen e3, threatening knight b5 mate. Thanks, Spencer, for showing me that mate in one, which I didn't see. And in this position, the best move is rook e7. Now knight b5 isn't mate because I play king d7 check, and I win your queen. So rook e7 attacks the queen and lets the king go to d7 with check. And there's not really a good move here. The engine says I have to give my queen away. That's not good. Okay, so instead of queen e3, he played rook c4. Now the engine wants to play rook a7 check, hoping for this checkmate. Always checkmate. Queen b7 mate is coming. And then it says after rook a7, we have to play king b6 or king b5. Rook here check. Eventually white wins. But he played the second best move, also winning pretty handily. Rook c7. Even though the king is on d6, it's pretty safe. Now if we play knight b5 check, which looks like it wins, I play king d5 check. I check you, you check me. Radjabov has the worst score in history. Okay, so this is winning for white. Also, you can't play rook takes rook. Or wait, he did play rook takes rook. So you can play rook takes rook, right? No, oh no, he played king b5. That's better. Rook takes rook also loses almost immediately. King takes and bishop c6 check. That's pretty immediately. So he played rook king b5, which is the engine move. Queen e5 check, also the engine move. And here, rook d4 check is forced. But after king e7, our knight is attacked. And here comes the e-pawn. And the e-pawn's queening with check. It's hard to stop that pawn from queening. This pawn's pretty easy to stop. Rook a7, rook c1. So he went down quicker. Rook takes c7, trading rooks. e6, e7. And now black resigned. Black can play knight d6 if he doesn't want to resign. Then bishop d1, bishop b3. Black has no counterplay. White's going to queen and win the knight. And white wins the king and pawn ending easily, assuming black wastes 5 tempi and wins the bishop for the a-pawn. So in this position, after e7, black resigned. Really nice win from Fabi. Really nice technique. Another position for the cover of my book, never play f6. f6 clearly the losing move. His position wasn't so good before that. Back to the drawing board. And after that round, Fabi with +3, normally he'd be in first place. The truth hurts. So I hope you enjoyed that game. Keep watching for more recaps on YouTube and watch live at twitch.tv/GM Benjamin Feingold. Bye, YouTubers.
Bye, YouTube.